So, you just finished The Mandalorian Season 3... Wait, it's not The Mandalorian Season 3? What is it then? The Book of Boba Fett? But he's hardly in it. So, you just finished The Book of Boba Fett, and were thinking that surely there were some hidden details and Easter eggs that you might have missed. Well, you'd be right, and also don't call me Shirley. Now, because there were so many callbacks, Easter eggs, and hidden meanings, we thought we'd make a video about 25 things you missed, because that's kind of the thing we do around here, in the The Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I said. That's what I do. I've been working my butt off.
With cameos from Grogu, Luke, Cobb Vanth, Ahsoka, and even Boba Fett were exciting, the one that got me the most giddy was the introduction of the Wookiee mercenary, Black Krrsantan. Black Krrsantan made his debut in 2015 in Marvel's Darth Vader series, and quickly became a fan favorite. The Wookiee was taken from his homeworld of Kashyyyk by the Shanti brothers, and trained to be a gladiator in the fighting pits, hence the Hutt's line about him being sent back to them. Also in the comics, Black Krrsantan also becomes a bounty hunter and at one point works alongside Boba Fett. Another big cameo of someone making their first appearance in live action was Cad Bane. You know, the guy with the sneer that looked like he just walked in some Bantha shit. Bane, who's from the planet Duro, learned his trade under the guidance of Jango Fett. And he also went toe-to-toe with Ahsoka and Anakin, and even has a run-in with Boba's new right hand, Fennec Shand. Yes, I'm aware that rhymed. But Bane is perhaps best known as the tutor of Boba. But their relationship eventually took a dark turn, and the two ended up in a standoff that left Boba being shot in the head and giving him that iconic dent on his helmet. If there is one thing time has done, it's that it's made us find new appreciation for the prequels, and both The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett have no problem paying reference to the trilogy. Now, whether that be Mando's new ship, the stripped-back N-1 Starfighter, which doesn't really make too much sense as a bounty hunter ship, but whatever, which is the ship that Anakin flew in Phantom Menace, plus the fact that they both even do the spinning trick and use the slang word wizard. And there's also the moment that Mando flies through Beggar's Canyon, which was where the pod racing took place in Phantom, and is where Luke Skywalker flew his T-16 Skyhopper shooting womp rats growing up before A New Hope. Mos Espa is also, of course, the town where Anakin was born and raised before he went off with Qui-Gon. Other references to the prequels include Boba's flashbacks to when he was a child, such as when he was on his homeworld of Kamino, and also there was the loss of his father Jango at the Battle of Geonosis, as well, of course, as Grogu's flashback to Order 66 and his escape from Coruscant. Now, it wouldn't be a Star Wars project without throwing in some absolutely lovable droids. First of them is 8D8, voiced by the brilliant Toast of London, IT Crowd, and What We Do in the Shadows actor Matt Berry. Now, 8D8 was last seen in live action as a droid torturer in Return of the Jedi, with him even making a reference to his former profession with the line "tortured screams." The other is R3X, who is a dealer at the Mos Espa Casino, and you may recognize the droid from Disney's theme parks. The Scorpion Annihilator droids are also famous in Star Wars lore and are actually based on concept designs for an evolution of the Phantom Menace's droidicas. But another recognizable droid is the BD who works for Peli. And that's because BD-1 is the helpful assistant to Cal Kestis in the video game Fallen Order. Now back to cameos now. Robert Rodriguez made a name for himself directing movies such as Machete, Spy Kids, From Dusk Till Dawn, El Mariachi, and Sin City, which he co-directed. But he also directed one of the most infamous Mandalorian episodes, The Tragedy, as well as episodes 1, 3, and 7 in the Book of Boba Fett. But the director also makes a cameo in the series, not once, but twice. His first cameo is as Doc Strassi, the leader of the Trandoshan family who works under Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine, while his second cameo is as the voice translation of Mayor Mok Shaiz. Now, speaking of the mayor, a combination of prosthetics and animatronics were used to bring him to life, and you have to say he looks pretty good. Now, just like there are many nods to the prequels, there are, of course, multiple references to the original trilogy, and in particular, Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. Of course, there's the remains of Jabba's barge that was destroyed by Luke and co., references to Yoda, and the way that Luke trains Grogu, such as the balancing and backpack scenes. Of course, the Marksman H training remote from A New Hope was also another welcome addition to what was already a fantastic episode. Other references include the nighttime scene of a wart outside of Boba's palace in Episode 3, which is very similar to a shot in Return of the Jedi, and the blink-and-you'll-miss-it glimpse of a painting of Jabba the Hutt on his throne during the whole chase sequence with the mods. But my favorite ode to the classic Star Wars trilogy and movies in general is the use of the Wilhelm scream as the Rancor throws a Pike Syndicate member down the streets of Mos Espa. Another reference to the greater Star Wars lore is the spider droid carrying a fishbowl of orange-red liquid, which is a member of the Bomar Order. For those unfamiliar, the Bomar Order are a religious sect whose members transplanted their brains into these bowls and used the spider droids to move about. And members of the Order were apparently originally the owners of Mos Espa before Jabba decided to take over. The Bomar Order Spider Droid, which is a very, very difficult thing to say, try saying that 3 times fast, first appeared in Return of the Jedi, and they still seem to be roaming the sands of Tatooine in the Book of Boba. While Boba's escape from the Sarlacc pit was changed from other Star Wars works, like Star Wars Legends, the show does pay tribute to Legends through imagery, with Boba's emergence from the pit strikingly similar to the imagery portrayed in 1996's A Barv Like That. As well as references to the past, Book of Boba Fett also paves the way for the future and the horrible fate that awaits Luke's new school. As Ahsoka says, the Ant Droids are constructing a great school where Luke will induct a new generation of Jedi into the ways of the Force, which all but sets up Luke's infamous arc with his nephew Ben in the sequel trilogy. Also, did anyone notice Ahsoka's blink-and-you'll-miss-it use of the Force over Din's gift in that episode? I mean, nosy much? I bet she would be terrible at Secret Santa. Now, seeing as the original Star Wars trilogy was an homage to classic westerns, as well as samurai movies, it is no surprise that the Book of Boba Fett also pays reference to many westerns in the finale. In particular, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The moment that Din and Boba rush out to attack the Pikes in a do-or-die assault is very similar to the legendary final shot of Butch Cassidy. And the wall that the Freetown citizens hide behind later in the episode also looks very similar to where Paul Newman and Robert Redford hold up for their final stand. Now, while we saw the return of many famous Star Wars creatures like the Rancor and the Bantha, we also saw some other familiar creatures. The Tusken Raiders Massiffs. The reptilian space dogs were first seen in Attack of the Clones, but also were a prominent feature in the Clone Wars series. Also, speaking of the Massiffs, most people will recognize the other prisoner with Boba in Episode 1 as a Rodian, with Greedo being the most infamous of that species. However, while we have seen green and yellow Rodians in Star Wars lore, this is the first time we've ever seen a red one. While the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian mostly move away from the Skywalkers, their presence can certainly be felt in these series. In particular, Luke's old man, Darth Vader. Well, that's because Cad Bane's line, "You know it's true," reminds us of Vader's famous line,
"Search your feelings, you know it to be true."
While the Major Domo line of "Agreed, let us dispense with the pleasantries" reminds us of Vader's, "You may dispense with the pleasantries, Commander. I am here to put you back on schedule." But Vader is not the only Skywalker referenced in the finale, with Peli's insult of "bucket of bolts" a reference to Princess Leia's "this bucket of bolts is never gonna get us past the blockade" line in Empire Strikes Back. It wouldn't be a bar on Tatooine without a cantina band playing in the background, right? In fact, as Boba and Fennec do the rounds, you can hear the Star Wars theme/cantina band being played by none other than Max Rebo and Figrin Dan, who you will likely recognize from A New Hope. Thankfully, it would seem they weren't in the sanctuary when it was blown up by the Pikes, so they get to play another day. Also, does anyone know what type of music style the cantina band play? I don't think I can say it on YouTube, but, look it up when you have a spare minute. Speaking of A New Hope, the small cantina where Boba goes to give the speedbikers an ass-whooping is most likely Tosche Station, which was in a deleted scene from the original Star Wars movie. Also, the couple in the cantina are almost certainly Cammy and Fixer, who are Luke's old childhood friends. God, I wonder if they know what their old pal is up to these days. As you know, The Mandalorian Season 2 started with Mando, the Marshal, some Tuskens, and the people of Freetown taking down a Krayt Dragon, the remains of which can be seen in Episode 6. Now, the most notable reference to the dragon slaying is the skull that can be seen attached to the Jawa sandcrawler, but if you look closely in the bar in Freetown, I say closely, but you can see the creature's ribcage being used as a decoration, or, structural support. Now, we already mentioned references to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but another Western reference is one of my favorite movies of all time, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The three-way standoff in Episode 6 feels very similar to the finale of the movie, and also 3 of the major players in the Book of Boba Fett link up with the characters in that movie. Din being the good, Clint Eastwood's Blondie, Cad Bane being the bad, Angel Face, and sorry Temuera Morrison, but that leaves Boba as the ugly, aka Tuco. In fact, Angel Eyes was the original inspiration for Cad Bane's design and demeanor. Of course, Episode 6 ends with Grogu's choice, with him having to choose between the way of the Mandalorian and his papa, symbolized with the Beskar shirt, and becoming a Jedi under the tutelage of Luke, which is symbolized with Yoda's lightsaber. However, this creates a bit of a continuity error, as in the comics, the lightsaber is destroyed by Mas Amedda as a symbolic representation of the Jedi's end. But to be honest, it's hard to tell these days what's considered canon and what's not. Despite the backlash, the mods do serve as a reference to George Lucas himself, with them being a clear nod to Lucas's first major work, American Graffiti, which focused on greaser and rock and roll cultures of the early 1960s. Also, the real-life mods who were prevalent in the 1950s and 60s did ride around in brightly colored scooters, while the colors chosen also happened to be the same as lightsaber colors. Now, one of the best parts of the Book of Boba Fett certainly has to be the unleashing of the Rancor, but also the way that it added depth to the creature that wasn't really seen in Return of the Jedi. As Space Machete, as Danny Trejo says, they are emotionally complex and their owner's personality and traits is imprinted on them. However, this isn't new in the world of Star Wars, as unaltered clone Omega bonded with a young Rancor in the Bad Batch. Trejo also mentions the Witches of Dathomir, which is a reference to the Night Sisters of Dathomir who master dark magic, and were seen in the Clone Wars. Now, while Boba's beef with the Pikes and Cad Bane took center stage, you may have noticed the tension bubbling between Krrsantan and the Trandoshans. During the Godfather-style betrayal montage, Krrsantan gets attacked by Trandoshans, and the reason for this is due to the long and storied history between the two species. The Trandoshans were revealed as keen Wookiee hunters who take great pleasure in wiping out the Wookiee population of Kashyyyk. And another subtle reference to this feud can be seen when the Trandoshan representative gifts Boba with a Wookiee pelt in the first episode. Now, if there's one thing the internet loves, it's when actors do their own stunts. So, you'll be happy to learn that Temuera Morrison and Ming-Na Wen performed a majority of their own stunts in the show. In fact, Morrison, at age 60, got himself back into fighting shape for the show, working out at his home gym so he could bring the physicality to the character. Ming-Na Wen also did a majority of the hand-to-hand combat sequences, with Morrison saying Ming-Na was very good at all the martial arts stuff. Now, throughout the Book of Boba Fett, we see the Pikes using a Camtono to store credits and bombs in. But what makes the device's inclusion in the show so special is its connection with Empire Strikes Back. In the movie, a background character can be seen running through Cloud City holding what is clearly an ice cream maker. So Favreau decided to give the device a purpose and described them as containers used throughout the galaxy. Now, another thing that the Book of Boba Fett did was give depth to the Tusken Raiders and flesh out their culture, and reportedly, Morrison drew on his Maori heritage to imbue Boba Fett with a warrior spirit. In fact, there's even a version of the haka, which is a ceremonial dance in Maori culture, performed by Fett and the Tusken Raiders. Now, this is technically a Mandalorian Season 2 episode, but you know what? I'm gonna do it anyway. As Boba ascends the throne in the post-credits scene, we can see some writing on the chair he sits on. That writing, which is in the language of the Sith, loosely translates to Boba Fett, so I guess he was destined to rule all along. While a number of the droids, such as the Ratcatcher, are sadly fiction, some of them robots seen in the show actually exist in the world today. In the first episode, Boba Fett and Fennec Shand pay a visit to Mos Espa, and several four-legged droids can be seen walking the streets, and they are in fact the Spot robots created by Boston Dynamics, which are famous for being pushed over on YouTube, with a little added customized paneling. And finally, we may have been wondering how Boba escaped from the Sarlacc pit, but Patton Oswalt called it years ago. During the Star Wars filibuster scene in Parks and Rec, Oswalt describes Boba's emergence from the Sarlacc pit almost shot for shot. I mean, he must be a secret Simpsons writer or something.